He wants to make a wish.
Make a wish.
So the first person, Michael Engber, can you come up please?
Well, I'm apparently introducing half of Rick's experience to half of you. Thank you, Karen. To half of you, and the other half of you can stop listening because you all know all about it. Well, maybe you don't. Camp Rising Sun was established in 1930, and Rick came to it in 1950 as a nature counselor, and he continued until 1950. Well, that's a misstatement. I was going to say he continued until 1953, but if you look at the ages of the people here, and I include myself, you'll realize that his contribution to Camp Rising Sun and his continuation with it lasted far beyond 1953. I was a camper in 1957. Rick was not a counselor. But at some point during the summer, I don't remember when it was, one of the experienced guys, a second-year camper, said, "Rick Richter's coming next week." I didn't know what that meant. But indeed, Rick Richter came next week, and that was the start of my acquaintanceship with him, my friendship with him, and that connection between Rick and campers. I'm looking at two campers from 2006, and, well, some people are going to have to help me on years, but a lot of more recent campers are here to do honor to Rick. There's a quality of Rick that there's a very public connection with Rick and the campers of Camp Rising Sun. And then there are secret connections. And the fact that you're giggling makes me think that that came out the wrong way. What I wanted to talk about were things that I came to know more or less by accident. Through a connection of my son, who had a college classmate, and so on, I learned that a camper from 1949, before Rick was actually a counselor, remembered Rick for nature walks that he took him on, and remembered Rick fondly. Dan graduated in '98. So that's 50 years later that this man remembered Rick Richter fondly. And in 1993, Rick was the agent behind a very exciting event when the then Foreign Minister of South Korea, who had been a camper, organized a lunch for his campmates and some others. And I learned on that occasion that Rick was the agent of helping this, by then senior government official. As a young man, Rick was the agency through which this young man was given the help that he needed to continue his studies. This dignified foreign minister of South Korea told the story, and his voice broke. And he said, "Koreans are not supposed to show emotion." So this kind of thing, I think, is characteristic of Rick. Hidden gestures that sometimes get revealed by accident, by the accident of my being at this luncheon that Rick helped organize, or the accident of my son having a college classmate whose father remembered Rick fondly after 50 years. So there's the public Rick whom we're honoring, there's the private Rick, of whom we get glimpses once in a while. And I love them both.
And we'd like Lenny Kopp and Mark Banks to come up. Where are you guys? Here we go. But now I'm too old.
Well before many of you were born, a very skinny 17-year-old kid took a class, his first class in college, at the State University of New York at Albany, which was just then, the new campus was just opening up. Campus Center wasn't open, the gym wasn't open, let alone there was no rack. We never even thought about that. All meals were taken on campus. And I walked into what I thought was a very exciting and interesting and exotic class called sociology, because back in 1966 in high schools in New York, or at least where I went to high school, here in Westchester County, which was a pretty good county to go to school in, there were no sociology classes in high school, there were no psychology classes in high school, there was nothing. You took 4 years of history, you took 4 years of English, you took 4 years of math, 4 years of science. And I walked into that class not knowing what to expect. And this gentleman, Dr. Richter, as I knew him back then, came in, and we didn't have textbooks. The textbooks, I can't even begin to tell you, people who went to Albany later on, what it was like. There was no bookstore. There was the basement of the library was where they were handing out books, and you waited online for hours before you could get a textbook. But the textbooks didn't come in. So Dr. Richter lectured on the Hopi Indians, you know, and to me it was fascinating, and I hung on every word that he said. He has been a friend of mine. You know, we've been in contact for, it's 44 years now. I mean, I can't even imagine being 44 years of age, let alone having been through school for 44 years. And it's going to happen to all of you. I mean, you know, it'll happen to all of you. But he was a mentor and a friend of mine throughout my college experience. Things like the Vietnam War, which caused some of us a great deal of anxiety. He helped me through, helping me to maintain my residence in the United States instead of having to go overseas. He helped me through periods of deep depression when Richard Nixon was elected president in 1968, which for some of us seemed to be the end of the world. But then I came into his office and there was a picture of Rick and Barry Goldwater, of all people. To some of you that won't mean anything, but for some of us, the fact that there would be a picture with Rick with Barry Goldwater meant that the sun would rise again tomorrow. He was an inspiration to me. Mark and I took several courses with him throughout college. And I don't know that my college experience would have been the same if it had not been for Dr. Richter. Now, it took me a long time for me to call him Rick, because he was my first professor, and it was Dr. Richter. And this is the kind of man he was. He says, look, Lenny, if you don't call me Rick, I'm going to start calling you Mr. Kopp. And in those days, you know, you didn't do that. So Rick, I'm delighted. I never thought that, you know, that I would be here on your 80th birthday. And what's scary to me is that mine isn't that far away. So I want to thank you so much for all you've done to me, and for even my son Matt, who took a course from you back in much more recent times. You've been a great friend and an inspiration, and I'm truly honored to be with you today. Thank you.
It seemed weird that Lenny and I came up together, but Lenny made a very important comment, Rick, when he says that you were such an important part of making his experience what it was. Well, Lenny and I grew up together in elementary school, kindergarten on, went to Albany State together, and when I think of my Albany State experience, you know, I think of what it was like having Lenny there. And after you and I met, I also think of what it was like having you in this, forming a triumvirate, which was kind of an amazing group to be in. Lenny came back after his, when it came time to register for classes for a second semester. I don't know if you mentioned, did you mention your first class, first semester, all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So
8 o'clock in the morning.
First class of college. So Lenny comes back and says, yeah, it's kind of an interesting class. It looks really good. So I didn't want sociology first semester. I took it second semester. And I was looking at it, okay, so we'll see what this Richter's guy's got, you know, being cynical about it all. And I came back, and very early in the semester, it was the first class, but very early in the semester, concepts were kind of coming across from it that I had never thought about, you know, in high school or ever been exposed to. Things like don't confuse causation and correlation. And I remember one story you told about how deaths in Bombay were very highly correlated with ice cream sales in Central Park. And you were trying to help us understand that
the people who are eating ice cream in Central Park were not killing people in India. There's no causal relationship, but there's a correlation. That made it very clear to me. And the way you just transmitted a lot of those new concepts, it really resonated in a way that I don't think I've ever experienced in my education up to that point. So I think we can all reflect back on those kinds of experiences we had with Rick and the way he helped us see the world, become students, and later become the people we were. So Rick, I want to thank you so much for those experiences, and I'm delighted to be able to call you my friend still.
Just to show the diversity and age and experience that we have here, and all the ranges of years that Rick has touched in his life. Harry Samaroo from camp would like to say a few words to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've known camp Professor Maurice Richter through camp. I was a camper there in 2000, so I've known him for 10 years now. I remember at camp, I was a very shy kid, but Professor Richter, he always, found me, every time he visited, and took some time to, talk to me, talk about my future, what I wanted to do in terms of schooling and, future career and so forth. But I remember Professor Richter was probably the first person in my life that spoke to me about research and explaining what research is all about. And, I'm proud to say that today, 10 years later, research is what I'm doing as, part of my career. That's probably something that I'm going to be doing for a long, long time. And, it started with this man here. And I know he's touched probably a lot of people in their lifetimes. He's built friendship for like many, many years, from, among young people, older people. So he's been a great friend, and I think, in my lifetime, there are many people that have helped me, but, Professor Richter, he has helped me in a very unique way, in the sense that he offered something that, sometimes we, underappreciate, and what he offered to me was just a little bit of his time, and that's something that I really value tremendously. So, I want to thank him very much. Congratulations on reaching 80, and, I wish you, lots of, great health, and, lots, just having, another set of, very enjoyable years to come, and, I just wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
I wanted to say just a few words about this man, Rick, and all that he's meant to me. And I don't pretend that my story is the best story, because one thing I've learned is by speaking to people is that every story from every person gets better and more inspirational than the one before. Because Rick has touched so many lives, but one thing that he did for me was my sophomore year of college at SUNY Albany was a rough time for many different reasons. And I went to several of my professors asking for some help or some extra time, a little consideration, and most of them basically gave me the cold shoulder and said, well, I'll see you at the final. And I frankly was expecting the same from Rick. Not that I didn't think he was a nice guy. I sat in his class, I learned all about China and different things that were going on all over the world. But I didn't expect him to say, well, why don't you meet me in the platoon room at Albany and we could sit down and talk about it. I was befuddled. I really had no idea what to say. And that led to many more lunches at the platoon room. He gave me a chance to take the final over. And let me tell you something. When you're trying to get into law school, to not have a disastrous grade on your transcript like I would have had made all the difference in the world. And Rick has been there for me. Lunches, dinners here all the time. And Rick, you have made such an impression on so many people for so many years. We just don't have enough time in a day or a week or a month to talk about it all. But we love you, and happy birthday.